Hello,
No.
everyone. Thank you for watching The Naturalist Capitalist. I'm your host, Reed Coverdale, and I'm coming to you from Cheyenne, Wyoming in the sleeper cab tonight. And I've got a guest that a lot of you probably know of. I've got Magnus Panvidya. Am I saying that correctly? Or
Panvidya, you're close.
Panvidya. All right, sorry.
It's all good.
I mean, most of the people watching this probably already know who you are, but why don't you just for those who don't, just give us a little background on what you've been doing the last few months and over the years?
Yeah, so I'm just a lifelong activist, hippie, gaming nerd, libertarian, anarchist. Throw your labels at me. Been very heavily involved with the Boogaloo movement since its very beginning, and trying to spread this crazy concept that seems alien to most people until they hear it and they really like it. Of hey, let's just all stop being assholes to each other and work together. So
yeah. It is that is a radical idea right now, unfortunately. I'm just going to roll this clip just in case people haven't seen it yet. And maybe if people see this clip, they'll actually recognize who you are because it's been around a bit. But I'll play this right here.
Antifa, Boogaloo, and right-wing militias, they are the antibodies, not the disease that is destroying our country. The disease is a country run by two corrupt political parties that do not care about you. So deeply incestuous with corporations that they are indistinguishable from each other. A government that spent 6 months debating whether to give their own people $600, but only 24 hours to unanimously agree to give billions of dollars to foreign tyrannical governments and corporations. A government that has bombed villages overseas my entire life for my supposed safety here. This is a call for unity. For all of American people that realize the true threat against us to come together. For every mother mourning her children that was killed by police. For every business crushed down by state lockdowns. For every broken soldier sent to fight wars that have no point. This is our last chance to avoid either a tyrannical government or a bloody and pointless civil war among American people who do not have that much against each other and have more in common than they realize. And a message to the government. We come in peace. We do not intend to commit violence, but I am pleading with you, with tears in my eyes and cracks in my voice. If you continue to oppress the American people, they will remain rational no longer. Thank you.
All right. So, yeah, everything you said there is exactly what I've been saying for months. And finally, somebody with an audience got to say it to a bunch of people. And it's been popular. You've been on Jimmy Dore's show. You've been all over. Just tell everyone where you've been since that clip got out, how it skyrocketed you to a bunch of different channels, and who's had you on and what your experiences have been like with that.
Yeah, so I went on Liberty Lockdown first. He was the one that quote unquote discovered me pretty much. I talked to him, and then since then I went on Jimmy Dore. I've been on Alex Jones. I was on the Free Assange podcast. I was on Foots on the Ground. I'm starting to lose track of all of them. I've been interviewed by a whole bunch of people. We have a growing list. And then I was supposed to go on Nico House yesterday, but something happened. He had a personal emergency, so we rescheduled that. And then eventually I have an interview with Spike, and this Thursday I'm going back on Alex Jones. So with an Antifa member, which is going to be very interesting. I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, I'm excited for that too. I want to watch that.
Star, my Antifa best friend at this point, is no pushover. She's a tough lady, and she's been through some shit, so it'll be really interesting to see how her and Jones bounce off each other.
Well, I'll definitely have to watch that when it comes out. So Jimmy Dore, as far as commentators go on the left, he seems like the type of guy who's into unity more than anybody else. But for some reason, when I was watching your video, it was like there were gears grinding in his head and smoke coming out of his ears. Like he couldn't really fathom what was going on. and I was kind of thinking like, dude, do you not know what libertarians believe, or do you not know what anarchists believe? Like, I mean, you've had people like this on your show before, maybe not from the Boogaloo Boys, but you've had libertarians and you've had anarchists. It was just like this really big disconnect once you have a gun. Almost that seemed to me to really be the only thing that was disconnecting him from you. Was it more than that, or what do you think was causing that confusion?
I definitely think it was like the militia thing. Yeah, he originally thought I was a right-wing dude, so he was even more confused when I started going into like anarchy and libertarianism. And I also think a lot of these mainstream pundits, like when they get libertarians and they get anarchists on, we really water down our message, and we're really like we try to be like consumer friendly about it, to where I'm like straight up like, abolish all federal agencies, open the borders, guns for everybody. Yeah. Like I don't play, I'm very open about like, hey, this is what the entire bottom of the political spectrum is like. And so many people have so little exposure and confusion on what anarchists and libertarians believe, and a lot of ignorant beliefs. So when you just lay it all out, they're like, whoa, I didn't know that exists. It's a giant political spectrum, and you only hear about generic conservative and generic progressive, and then very recent, Democrat and conservative, and now you have progressive kind of becoming more mainstream and people kind of understanding more what a progressive is. But still, most people don't understand like what libertarianism is. They think it's just like, oh, conservative with less laws and guns and marijuana. And it's like, no, right. It goes a lot deeper than that.
Yeah. So I think the left-right divide is just dumb. And I know you said that on Jimmy's show. I think all that matters is how libertarian or how authoritarian you are. That's a small L on the libertarian. So, if someone believes that we should keep ICE and we should, bomb Iran, I don't look at them as any less of a statist than someone who thinks we should have Medicare for all and gun control. To me, it's really like, how much government authority do you want in running our lives? How much power do you think the state should have? And when you put it in that lens, the left-right dynamic disappears, because if you're a leftist culturally, but you don't want the government controlling anybody, then you're not, it doesn't matter if you're left-wing or if you're a right-winger. If you're a very personally conservative guy, straight edge, don't do drugs and you own guns, I mean, who cares, as long as you're not pushing any of your beliefs or pushing any of your societal visions on other people. And it seems to me that that's the new alignment, the new alignment we need, because we have this left-right bullshit so ingrained from, when we're, I don't know how old we are when we start learning about that, but from whenever we first get introduced to politics, it's all left-right. I didn't even find out about, everyone finds out about libertarianism or authoritarianism or any of these ideas long after they've been introduced to Republican, Democrat, left, right. And it's just really dumb. So it was cool seeing you on a YouTube channel that has a lot of viewers, and you basically said that exact same thing that I just laid out. Yeah, is there anything you want to add to that, or did you say that any differently? Or?
I like the diamond idea that's going on, to where like it's not a political square, it's a diamond, and like the very bottom is anarchy and the very top is authoritarianism, and then in the middle, obviously, it spreads out a little bit more, whether it be like social democracy or like neoconservative or whatever. But at the end of the day, like it's all either funneling up to like some crazy fascist state or funneling down to pure anarchy and pure volunteerism. So it's like, when you understand it that way, it makes a lot more sense, to where like I still don't understand how someone like, Justin Amash can be in the same party as someone like John McCain. Like they have like they don't agree upon like any principle. They don't mean anything, but they're both considered right wing. And then even then, like a lot of things that people consider conservative, like the Republican Party isn't any of those things. Like conservatism is like isolationism and protectionism and small government, to where like the Republican Party is just like Democrats with abortion. So it's really weird So yeah, just like I think I'm like breaking through a lot of people, and even in that interview with Jimmy Dore, and even like in the interview with Alex, people just kept like the left, the right, and I'm like, those really don't mean anything anymore at all. Like I don't think they ever really meant much, but especially these days, like that whole praxis is just falling apart.
Yeah, no, I mean, it pisses me off when people are like, "Oh, Rand Paul is to the left of his party on foreign policy." And I'm just like, what? Like, what does that even mean? He's to the left of them on foreign policy. You mean he's not as authoritarian as what you're saying? He doesn't.
Yeah, he doesn't want to bomb brown kids, so he's left wing? Question mark. Like I feel like everybody agrees, and kind of like the perfect example of that, and to kind of go into the whole thing about Twitter putting people in their bubbles and everybody's in their bubble, is with the Wall Street bets thing. I shared a post out about like how everyone was happy it was happening, whatever corner of the political spectrum they're on. And almost everybody agreed. And I was getting like Trump supporters and anarchists and communists and like normal people all liking it. And there was a bunch of really positive comments. But every once in a while, there's two of them on there that are polar opposite, to where one was like, none of the radical left supports the Wall Street bets thing. And then there was people on there like, oh, the conservatives don't support it. They're losing all their money. And I think it's just because like I'm in this weird middle ground where like half my account is like open communists and the other half is like libertarians and conservatives, that I'm like, what do you mean? Like everybody's down with this. I've yet to see anyone criticize it besides like a bunch of like millionaire political pundits and corporations. Like everybody's cheering this on, but it's so deeply ingrained and people are so in their bubble that they don't even know when the right agrees with them on stuff. They don't even know when the left agrees with them on stuff because they don't actually see these interactions. And you get you get onto subjects like Julian Assange or the drug war or everything, and like I've heard it many times from conservatives of like, oh, the left wing doesn't give a fuck about Julian Assange. It's like, no, like almost every single like open Marxist on my Twitter feed has free Assange in their handle. Like, but you don't talk to them because you're so isolated, and we don't cross these wires anymore, that it creates divides where there isn't any.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I thought another great point that you made in that video with Jimmy was that, you don't agree with Jimmy on some issues, but that's not what matters right now. There are much more demanding things that we take care of immediately. Being locked in our houses, trillions of dollars going to corporations and overseas corrupt governments, the police shooting people in their homes and getting away with it. People getting locked up for smoking a plant, or ICE detainment camps, and the Patriot Act and all this
NSA spying. Like you could just go on and on and on. There's so many like awful things that everyone agrees upon, but we can't come together because we have disagreements on other stuff. And I brought it up on Misty's podcast of like, I feel the analogy I use is like there's two prisoners that are chained together with a weight and they just got thrown off of a boat, and they both have the key, but they won't unlock the weight until the other side agrees with them on something. So they just keep sinking down, and things keep getting worse and worse and worse. And it's like, I have many disagreements with someone like Tucker Carlson, but if Tucker Carlson came up to me and is like, I want to host a free Julian Assange event, I'd fucking go. And I would hope everybody would go, and we would just all chill and nobody would cause any problems. There was an event in Chicago that a lot of people have forgotten about, where there was a protest against a Chicago black site run by the Chicago Police Department, where they locked up activists and fucking tortured them, which was Chicago PD was doing this. It was a joint event run by InfoWars and Black Lives Matter. Like Joe Biggs from InfoWars was down there along with BLM protesters, and nobody fought and nobody got into arguments, and we just everyone sat there, aired their grievances, and went home. And it's like, can we have more of that? Like, how much power would we have if like people showed up to stuff when they disagreed on other issues as just like a unit and had more numbers and more voices and more political pressures on each one of these things? How many problems we could solve? Yeah, because we have the numbers. I mean, the people in charge, even if you count the military against us, we have the numbers. Like there are millions of us, and they rely on our division to continue to subjugate us, because as long as
we're screaming about healthcare or the minimum wage or abortion or whatever, while they continue to take more and more money from us and give it to fucking Israel or Saudi Arabia or the military or whatever. You know, that
Like
they love
200.
that.
I don't know if it was 20 or 200 million to Syria to fund their police and give them like riot equipment and shit, which we've been trying to bomb and invade their country since I've graduated high school. Like,
Right.
what? It's so surreal. And
It really is. And I think that, you just brought up the Wall Street bets. That was one of the starkest examples of how you can make these people scared of us when we team up, because I feel like they were trying to actually divide us with that, with intervening with the apps and shutting people down, not allowing them to continue to buy the stocks or whatever, and selling people's stocks they had already bought without their permission. And that actually gilded the masses against what was going on. Everyone was like, holy fuck, are you actually doing this in broad daylight?
And they screwed up big time too, because they started running a bunch of stories saying that the Wall Street bets people were alt-right or Russian assets and stuff like that. And I'm so glad that happened right in the middle of all my saga, because I feel like a lot of people were like, oh no, I was told the Boogaloo is alt-right, but this Wall Street bet stuff, these guys are cool. And then the same news outlet started writing that the Wall Street bets people were alt-right, and they were like, wait. Like, something doesn't line up here. And then I feel like a lot of people came back to me and they're like, you might be right that the media uses it's not that identity politics are totally invalid, but the smartest people even on the left understand that these corporations will try to weaponize it desperately, and more people are waking up to the fact of they think they could just point the finger at someone and call them racist and we'll just go after them, and less and less people are doing that, and they're kind of catching on to their hustle.
Yeah, it's I think people are waking up slowly, and I think we're seeing more and more backlash from the establishment as that happens. I mean, this anti-domestic terror bill that's come out, and just the straight up demonization of all Trump supporters and all people on the right. I mean, they're just getting bolder and bolder, but I feel like that ultimately will backfire, and that's what's starting to happen, because it just becomes so blatantly obvious that you're trying to rig this game and keep the turmoil going, and more people are realizing it, because they're not being smart about it anymore. They're just being dumb.
CNN, they had a guy on just straight up talking about how they had to get rid of Fox News and shit and just take it off the air because it's a breeding ground of extremists or something. It's like, that's not going to work. And especially going to your point of being so ham-fisted, one of the main points that we got to use to kind of bridge the divide between us and Antifa is a lot of people weren't aware. It was really public when the Department of Homeland Security released that memo identifying Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. Not a lot of people read it, because inside that memo, we were included. So there was Antifa and then Boogaloo Boys in the same memo. And we got to approach a lot of these people and be like, hey, the same people that are tear gassing you in Portland are the same people that are calling us Nazis, but also saying that they need to send the FBI after us. And they're like, oh, that's weird. That's suspicious. And that memo is directly cited in their attempts to try to set up this Homeland Domestic Terror Task Force. So that door is getting kicked in any fucking day now, pretty much. If that bill passes.
That's fun.
So I went to one protest last summer. I'm a truck driver, so I'm working all the time, but I made it to one protest in Denver. And I wanted to go because I thought that, the protesters were being represented unfairly, and that I wanted to show that I care about police reform. What I felt happened with that whole mess was it got turned into a race war instead of a uniting against the state, which is what it was supposed to be. Because you had people 2 weeks before George Floyd was murdered, they were protesting in Michigan, for the lockdowns because they didn't have jobs and they were starving or whatever. And then 2 weeks later, you have people protesting police brutality. And in my mind, I was like, okay, these guys kind of should be on the same side because they're both angry at the state for wielding abusive authority. But instead, it turned into a really divisive war, against right wingers and then against, I don't know, black extremists or whatever they wanted to say. And it just blew my mind. And the media was intent on driving that divide, and on both sides, like Fox News was doing nothing but showing the riots and the people burning private property, trying to
never showing the hours and hours and hours of like peaceful protests, never providing context, never trying to identify who was fucking shit up. And I feel like the biggest issue that like something I don't think anyone's talking about, and I've noticed from the very beginning, is the people on the ground at these protests do not claim the looters as part of them. They view them as people coming outside and taking advantage of it. But a lot of these blue checkmark journos do claim them as part of BLM. And then whenever anyone goes after these outside people that are coming in, they don't give a fuck about Black lives at all. Like the protesters are over there fighting the cops. Johnny McBarfight that hasn't been to a football game in 6 months is breaking into the Target and stealing Legos because he has nothing better to do. So the protesters on the ground will be like, they're not with us. We don't stand for, they're not part of the movement. They don't represent us. But these blue check journos will try to tie them to the movement. And this almost makes me feel conspiratorial of like, they come across as supporting BLM, but by doing that, it seems like they want to give the right a talking point to then slander all of BLM and then make the right hate BLM more to just further that division, That makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's how every political movement that wants to subvert a smaller political movement gains power. They demonize them. Like that's what the Nazis did to the communists in Germany. They blame them for burning the Reichstag. And then, that's the most effective way to foster hate because otherwise they might hate the wrong thing. They might hate you. They might work together. Yeah, exactly.
And just exactly to your point, like we met up with a couple of the ladies from the local BLM, and I was in a Sky News news report about the lockdowns. We tried to organize an anti-lockdown protest when they implemented them again. Only 6 of us showed up. Only the Boogaloo Boys. None of the conservatives showed up. Nobody give a fuck. They were too burned out from going to Stop the Steal events, which shows where their priorities lie. Fuck local lockdowns where you make an actual change. Let's sit on the Capitol of Lansing and complain about Trump for fucking hours and hours. But immediately after we hung out, whatever, we got interviewed by Sky News. We then went with the BLM ladies to Andy Shore's house, which is the mayor of Lansing, and got on a megaphone and yelled at him to release people that were held in jail that were getting the shit beat out of them by cops when they were in jail. And it was like a big local drama. We went with the BLM people immediately after leaving a lockdown protest to go complain about police brutality with BLM. So it's like, this is the shit libertarians need to be doing. We need to embrace that like we're like this weird middle ground between these and be more on the ground. I think that's the biggest problem with the party, and even the LP idea in general is too many people don't want to go on the ground. They want to just they want to sit on Facebook and preach libertarianism and maybe vote for the LP when the election comes around, and that's it. To where like you really should have more, Peter Schiffs and stuff like that showing up to protests and being like, hey, yeah, this is bullshit. This might be how I would fix it, and that's different than how you fix it, but I'm still here.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny that you bring up Peter Schiff because he was actually my inspiration for going to that protest because a lot of people have seen his video when he goes to Occupy Wall Street. Yeah. And he's kind of educating all these people about what is really going on. And that's what I did. I went to that protest in Denver, and I had a sign, and it said, end qualified immunity, end civil asset forfeiture, and I think demilitarize the police or something. And I just walked around and I talked to like 100 people, and I was like, do you know what any of these things mean? And like 2 or 3 out of the like 100 people I talked to actually knew what they were. And I was like, holy shit, this is such an opportunity for more libertarians to be here, telling all these people who are angry why they should be angry and what we have to do to fix it. Because everyone there, you know, they're yelling like, no justice, no peace. And I was like, okay, great. What is justice to you? Like, what does that look like? You know, and they'd
Right.
be like,
Define your
I don't know.
terms. That's the most
Yeah.
important thing in the world. Define your terms. You know, what does that word mean to you?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's you're right though. Like a lot of people are just aimless and directionless and mad, which is fine because like not everybody is psychotic, you know, info files like a lot of us are. That, you know, it's particularly a lot of libertarians. Like we're just obsessed with knowing shit. We love knowing things. But, you know, going out and educating and talking to people, and even if you don't convince them into kind of like the LP libertarian way or whatever, like giving them ammunition for their leftist argument of like, oh, you know, I didn't know that detail. This is how I would oppose that through Marxism or something. Like, you know, just building mutual opposition and building like this kind of broad coalition of ideas that everyone is upset and we're all pissed off at this and we all want it to change. So,
yeah, absolutely. So, in that video with Jimmy, toward the end, you were talking about how the way around this now is just lack of involvement, I think is how you put it, like not paying taxes, not legitimizing the government at all. So
yeah.
do you still believe in electoral like exercises, like trying to get people elected, or is it beyond that point for you? Do you think we're like so far gone that there's nothing we can do except resist?
I think we've sailed past that. I think like the timeline, if we wanted like a Green Party libertarian coalition to destroy, you know, anarchist, anarcho-communist Green Party libertarian coalition to destroy the state and go do that through getting people elected on the local level and building up and eventually getting someone the president. We needed to be putting a lot of energy into that, like back when Ron Paul was running. And there wasn't that energy for that. So now things have progressed so far that the powers and the tools that they have is that if you had like somebody run that, you know, unified like the Green and the Libertarian Party and had like a third party coalition and was saying all the right things and going after all the right things, the media would destroy them. Facebook and Twitter would destroy them. They would, you know, get screwed with by the police. They'd get screwed with by the IRS. They'd be targeted by everything, and they wouldn't get platformed at all. There's so many people that are big fans of Tulsi Gabbard now that weren't fans of her back then because the media slandered the fuck out of her so effectively. So it, you know, I don't think that it's possible to do it electorally. Maybe after kind of like a broad show of resistance, of a broad, like showing the elites, whether it be through Wall Street bet stuff or like a general strike, or, you know, mass rent strike, mass tax strike, just, you know, all of that, maybe there'd be a possibility of coming around. But then at the same time, you would think like, unless most of these people that are in the government are gone, they're just going to give some token concessions and wait for the anger and the momentum to die down and then go right back to the same bullshit.
Yeah, that's why, I mean, I kind of agree with you. I feel like Ron Paul 2012 was our last shot at averting disaster. And then after we fucked that up, I was like, okay, we've gone off the cliff. Now it's about like, how hard are we going to hit? Are we going to deploy the parachute, or are we just going to slam into the rocks? So,
that's why people are like, oh, why are you all like, why is there so much talk of revolution and civil conflict and everything? It's like, 'cause I feel like it's inevitable at this point. It just depends on what form is it going to take. Is it going to be something like the Romanian Revolution, where only a handful of people die, but there's like mild shootouts and then the military surrenders and it's mostly like a big peaceful revolution? Or are we going to go full Syria, where we have some 20-year-long civil conflict of violence and destruction? Because I just don't see the establishment at any point being like, hey, we're just going to give up power. You know, we're not, because all they want is more. Every single election, they want more, and they're expanding it insanely at this point. And I don't see people like me or people like Antifa or, you know, the real BLM activists or everything just being like, okay, this is fine, and going home. So eventually push is going to come to shove, and it just depends on how bad it's going to be. And the more we work towards the unity thing, and the more we push towards mass civil disobedience, mass removing consent from the government, the less of a clusterfuck it'll end up being.
Yeah. I guess I'm still invested in both. I think that both are what we've got to do, because if there's a reconstruction period, or if the crash we hit doesn't destroy everything, we want to have something that we can unify around. Because if there is some sort of revolution right now, I would be scared that it would be like the French Revolution. There'd just be no plan for what comes afterward. And then you just have an autocratic government that's even worse than what we have step in and take control. I feel the same way if there were like what you were saying, a Syrian style civil war. I don't think that we would stay in that state forever. I think you would have an authoritarian state come forward and take control, because people would prefer, they'll prefer a Saddam Hussein to ISIS any day, because they won't like the mass hysteria.
They want their material comforts.
Right. So in my mind, we have to have something that centers around individual rights and mutual respect for each other, because there are so many people who are going to just want to see the other side burn. And if we do get to a place of extreme tension, I want there to be something in place that we can point to, if that makes sense. So that's why I'm like, maybe we're both wrong. Maybe we can turn this around. I don't think we can. But to me, it's like we're in a car headed for a brick wall, and we've gone past the point where you can hit the brakes hard enough to stop before you hit it, but you can at least like put your seatbelt on and press the brakes anyway, and slow the impact down a little bit.
Try to glance it at least. And that's definitely how I feel, and definitely towards that of like, the more unity you have between all of these groups, the less hatred is going to be, and thus ensuring that things are going to be less bad. But there's also like solving these immediate problems. The state's going to react violently no matter what. Like if we had 10,000 people surrounding Washington D.C. saying close down the NSA, they'll close down the NSA, but then open up something else. They'll continue to lash out more and more. So I do feel like it is inevitable, but also at the same time, that doesn't mean don't go vote, because voting is one day of your life. Everybody should do it. Just suck it up, go stand in line, check the box, vote. Vote green, vote gold, whatever. Vote right in, like just do it. But like to your point though, of it really kind of depends on how much you start locally organizing, because I think that's very important. Actually, the 3%er that was on after me on Alex Jones talked about this of when the American Revolution happened. Long before the revolution actually went down, people started organizing in their communities. They started going, we're not going to buy your textiles anymore. We're going to make our own textiles. We're not going to listen to the governor anymore. We're going to appoint a secret village like mayor, and he's going to actually tell people what to do. And they started forming these tight pocket communities and withdrawing consent from the English government years and years and years before the Declaration of Independence. And that's how a lot of those like original clashes started happening. But also I think the reason why they succeeded, and the reason why it didn't turn into an autocratic nightmare immediately afterwards, is because you had these small communities that all knew each other, really tightly knit. And that's something we really focus on. And that's a big thing of like me being a decentralist and me being a volunteerist. I'm all about like, you need small local communities that are all on the same page, that operate based on consent and will work together. And that's something we've definitely lost in America, but you see it kind of winding back up with things like the Chaz, a lot of the BLM community or outreach organizations, the fact that a lot more militias are forming. These are all elements of that idea.
Yeah. I had Ryan Dawson on my show a few days ago, and he is in favor of secession. He thinks that states should just straight up leave the union, say we're no longer going to pay income tax, we're no longer going to report for the draft, we're just not going to do anything the federal government wants us to do anymore. What do you think about that? Is that a possible peaceful way around
I mean, it wouldn't be peaceful, but it'd be less violent. But that's definitely also like another way to go about it is like why is Washington part of the country? You should totally just let them. They don't want a part of any of our bullshit. Why is Texas part of the country? Why is Michigan part of the country? Like I am a decentralist, so like the whole idea of my utopian world would be tens of thousands of little countries essentially that are all autonomous and they're small enough to be representative and small enough to where people don't get drowned out. And the fact that we're a country of 320 million something people, it spans an entire continent, and we pretend that of all these cultures and all these things that it would work out long term if we all just stay under a strong federal government. And you can make the libertarian argument of just like, oh, shrink the federal government. Well, it's like the federal government's not going to shrink at this point because it's out of control. Like you said, we already went over the cliff with the federal government. It's in total free fall. So definitely like mass secession, people setting up autonomous zones, local counties and stuff like that being like, hey, we're not going to give taxes to the government anymore. We're not going to enforce gun control. We're going to not allow ICE or Department of Homeland Security to have a presence in our county or in our, whatever. Just all those little fuck yous and all those little like, okay, well, I'm taking my toys and going over here actions from both the left and the right for both left wing and right wing ideas probably be the best way to go about it.
Yeah, you know what show you got to get on is Dan Berman for Texas. I don't know if you know him, but he's running for governor of Texas. He wants to turn Texas into what you're talking about. He just wants to kick out all federal agents. He wants to get rid of the police, basically. I love it. I'll send you a link to his profile, but you definitely got to hook up with him. He'd love to have you on.
Yeah, that's all what I'm about. And a lot of people hear that and they're like, oh, secession, that's such a right-wing thing. But then like you talk to like left-wing people and they're running around wanting to like recreate the Chaz everywhere, which is the same idea, just on a much smaller scale. Yeah, it's like everyone's kind of on this idea.
It's this divisive language. We use different terms and, it just causes this stupid divide that really doesn't exist because we kind of all think the same thing,
That's like, it was funny because the whole idea of the Unity Coalition within the Boogaloo all happened because a Boogaloo boy matched with a prominent Antifa activist on Tinder. And then they started talking to each other and he's like a full black fag anarchist, like thinks anarcho-communists are dumb and anarcho-capitalists are dumb. He's just like total like pure anarchy, screw everybody. And then she is an anarcho-communist. So they talked, and then I got involved, and I was, I'm more of like a mutualist leaning ANCAP. I don't have an issue with capitalism, but I don't have an issue with communism either. And then we got an ANCAP in there, and all four of us for like weeks and weeks just argued about everything until we realized that if we just stopped using labels, if we stopped calling it communism, capitalism, we just got rid of the labels and described the idea, we're like, son of a bitch, we all want the same thing. It's like, you're exactly right. Of like, language screws so many people up, and that's why I'm so huge on like define your terms, because a lot of people, you'll talk to them and one person will give their definition of communism and the other person will give their definition of communism, and they're not the same, and then they argue about the definition. To where like, if you just go like, okay, I accept your definition, now explain what that means to you, now accept my definition, I'll explain what that means to me, and then we'll figure out what the hell we're talking about instead of slap fighting over labels.
Yeah, I do want to ask you, because I get this question all the time, is how can anarcho-communists and anarcho-capitalists live together when capitalists believe in private ownership and communists don't? And you're better versed in this than I am, so how would you respond to that?
Yeah, just like if you embrace full anarchy, which is just volunteerism of essentially any system is okay as long as every single adult inside of it gives their consent and is able to withdraw their consent at any time. So the way that they would coexist is you would just have a town over here and they're a capitalist town, and you would have a commune over here, and if at any moment the capitalist went like, this working stuff is bullshit, I'm going to go become a communist, he could just leave and take his things and go to the commune. And then if he goes over there and he's like, oh, this isn't all it's meant out to be, then he could leave the commune and go under some weird anarcho, monarchist state where they elect a dude as the King Spaghetti and worship him. As long as you're allowed to live under any system voluntarily, and you can leave at any moment and participate as you want, which is how that's how anarcho-communist communes operate now in this country that exists now. Is people just show up, and then when they want to leave, they leave. Like so that's how it would work. And I think a lot of people think that they wouldn't work together because they're not actual anarchists and they just want to impose their version of anarchy through force on other people. So that's where you get the whole ANCAP helicopter meme. It's like it's not very anarchist to kill someone just for being a communist. And then you get like the you get the ANCOM thing where it's like, oh, we're just going to storm over and take over everyone's private property. And it's like, well, then you're not an anarchist,
right?
Like you're just a socialist, and so I think there's a lot of that to where the anarcho unity movement kind of thing that's been blowing up all over Twitter and spreading around is gaining momentum of like, hey, we could all just like coexist. There's no reason we couldn't. Everything would be fine.
Yeah, you're basically just like a bunch of Amish communities. Like it's the same idea. Like you're allowed to leave the Amish community if you want. You don't have to stay, but you don't want people coming in and changing their way of life. It's kind of the same idea. You just have a bunch of different type of Amish communities.
That's a great example. I never even thought of that. But yeah, like an Amish community or a Quaker community, or even again, like actual communes that exist nowadays that you could just go to. Like I was raised by one. You could just walk up to the commune and they'd be like, welcome. You can have anything, blah, blah, blah. And obviously being communistic, they're pure democracy. So if someone shows up, starts being an asshole, then they all just say, hey, you're not welcome here anymore. This is our spot. So they do believe in like a version of private property, but obviously it's complicated. But again, that's their rights. And one of the most compelling arguments I ever even heard from libertarianism is that it would be easier to be a socialist commune under a libertarian government than it would be to be a libertarian under a socialist government. Because if like we want to get rid of property taxes, so what's stopping 100 hippies from going and buying a bunch of farmland and then just going out there and doing commie stuff? Nothing.
Right.
Because we don't have property taxes. They can do whatever the hell they want. There's no federal government or anyone who can stop them. So it's like, yeah, this is what we're doing here.
Yeah, Larry Sharp was on my show the other day, and he pointed out that those are the very types of communities that authoritarian governments go after first. Whether it's the Nazis or the Russians, they go after these,
the gypsies usually. And the gypsies, they go after the gypsies. They when you look at how like Slab City has been targeted multiple times, when you look at any of like the weird like religious communes that have popped up over the 70s and 60s and everything, like the FBI immediately went after them because they don't want to see like a bunch of people just doing their own thing in their own autonomy. They don't want autonomous areas. They don't want autonomous zones. And that's the main thing with the Chaz is Star, the lady I talked to, she went to the Chaz multiple times and the police were trying to fuck that up from the very beginning. There's a lot of misinformation on the right wing that like Portland PD and everything just, like backed off from it and weren't involved to where like, if you look at a lot of what the activists on the ground are saying and stuff like that, like people were being fucked with constantly. And they had a lot of shady people like coming in and out and like trying to get people's like phone numbers and details and like addresses and stuff. And it's like FBI doing what the FBI does to like, whether it be Waco or the Chaz. Like this is how they target like these autonomous communities.
Yeah, it's almost they do it because they don't want any success. I think they don't want people to realize that you can live that way. So they've got to go fuck it up, right? So that you don't think you can live without the government.
Especially if it's armed. If you're an armed autonomous commune, they're immediately like, nope, nope, shut it down. And I can't remember the name of it, but it was an event in Canada where the Mounties were screwing with a native reservation, and the reservation ended up getting into like a multi-day like gunfight with the Canadian military. So like they do that to like indigenous people too. It's just they don't talk about it.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I want to talk about before I let you go is I've been a gun owner for a long time, but I wasn't ever a Second Amendment supporter, I guess, until Trump got elected. So what I mean by that is I owned guns for target practice and for shooting because I liked guns. And after Trump got elected, for some reason, that was what red pilled me to what the Second Amendment is for. And it wasn't because I thought he was a dictator or anything, but I realized all the progressives and liberals who had liked any of the executive orders that Obama had done and didn't criticize him for it, as soon as Trump came into power and he started reversing everything and doing all the things that he wanted and using all of Obama's authority to fulfill his agenda,
which Biden is doing right now in the same direction.
Biden is doing right now, yeah. But I saw that was the first moment it really hit me, because when Obama was elected, I was a little bit younger. I wasn't really paying attention, but I was just like, wow, people do not look 5 minutes down the road. They don't realize who can just take complete control after the next election and do whatever they want. And that was actually when I started becoming a Second Amendment absolutist. And I thought the exchange between you and Jimmy was beautiful, because you guys laid out the difference between what I used to be and what I became, because he's totally right about a lot of American gun owners. They do not own guns to shoot the military or the cops or whoever's going to come infringe on their rights. They own guns because they like shooting tannerite on the weekends, which is fine.
Which is a blast.
Totally fine.
Pardon the pun.
I love guns too. I'm a collector. I'm not just a Second Amendment absolutist. But then you laid out perfectly why we actually need guns to protect ourselves from, not just thieves or burglars or people who want to hurt us, but also from the government. And you guys have also actually done that. You've actually done the protesting, and you've done the advocacy for the Second Amendment by showing up to these protests armed and proving that no one will fuck with you guys when you all have, heavily loaded, AKs and ARs, and they'll leave you alone.
UPG in Louisville, they were walking around with a 40 mil grenade launcher. Like I've shared pictures on my Twitter, but little Jacoby, the black kid in a lot of the UPG pictures, was just walking through Louisville with a 40 mil. You never heard about crackdowns on protests in Louisville because you had UPG there every single day. You had 13 armed individuals in a mixed race militia. And I even shared that story of just like a liberal woman from Tampa that came up to Louisville to go to a Breonna Taylor event. And she saw like the cops were just like chasing this kid, and she didn't know why they were chasing this kid. And he ran into the park where UPG was at, and the cops fucking stopped, turned around and left. And it's like, even she went into like, maybe there is something to this whole Second Amendment thing. It's like, yeah, like nobody wants to get shot. Like everyone's like, oh, you're bringing a gun because you want violence. And I'm like, the most peaceful protests I've gone to over this entire year have been when there's a bunch of people with fucking guns, because nobody wants to mess around. Yeah. Nobody wants problems when people are armed, including the police. If they see some skinny hippie kid with a sign, they'll just shoot him with a rubber bullet and laugh and get in their cop car and go home. They see a bunch of dudes with plate carriers and rifles, they're like, oh.
Yeah, it's mutually assured destruction, so no one's gonna set that battle off. I mean, they know that they're not just going to be able to get away with it and then brush it under the rug. Like, you're going to have a massacre on your hands if you do something. And that's
especially when a lot of our equipment's better than the cops. So it's like,
yeah. I mean, I think that's actually half the point of the Second Amendment, is not even to actually shoot at the government. It's more, half the point is to tell the government to knock it off. And what are they going to do when you've
keep
got
them constantly terrified?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Bundy Ranch is perfect too. Like, Bundy Ranch is a great example. I actually got a question from somebody of like, how can you advocate for armed if there was a bunch of if they had a bunch of guns at Standing Rock, nothing, like, they just would have got killed. And I'm like, look what happened at Bundy Ranch. They outnumbered and outgunned those federal agents, and they literally were just like, screw this, and they left. Like, I think the Standing Rock protest would have been really different if you just had a bunch of like Native American dudes with just AKs standing on a hill over that pipeline. Like, they wouldn't go for it, because they know that there's no bad press in tear gassing protesters. There's no bad press in batoning protesters. The left will cry about it, but the right will cheer. They'll be like, yeah, go beat up those dirty hippies. And at the end of the day, like, the scales don't shift at all. You know, protesters get beat up, cops go home, nothing changes. But the establishment and the police are well aware that if there's some kind of bloodbath, doesn't matter how it goes down, they're going to look really bad. You know, the people involved in Waco were not good people. Like, the Branch Davidians were not good people, but they still have sympathy to this day because they were butchered. And, you know, the establishment is very aware of that. Like, oh, we don't want another Ruby Ridge. We do not want another Waco because people will never forgive us for it. So they back off.
Yeah. Well, I am so glad that you have gone viral because you're in a better position to give my message than I am, because you are an exemplification of what I'm talking about. You've been on the ground in all these places. You have lots of friends on both sides of this deal, and you're also eloquent and intelligent, which is a nice plus because you know, you can actually articulate this message, and I'm super glad this happened. I'll give you the last word. Just tell people how they can help you out or follow you or support you or whatever you want.
Yeah, so pretty much the only place I'm at is, you know, Magnus Panvidya on Twitter. It's the only place I'm allowed. I've been banned off of everything. We have something in the works, two things in the works. I'm gonna start working on a Boogaloo documentary. I want to actually make it pretty professional and actually get the full story out and include a lot of details that even like the media and the public don't know. I want to go kind of like all access with it as much as I can without obviously exposing some people's names or anything or putting anyone in danger. You know, and get actually our side of the story out on that. So that's something I want to work on. And then I'm waiting until I go on Nico House's program, but we're forming kind of like a new organization, BLM, me and Antifa and Boogaloo people and everything. We got something in the works, and it kind of is exactly what you've been working on and I've been working on, people like Jimmy, of setting up a kind of system and a network for people that disagree on everything else to come together on single issues and just be 4 times the size and just, you know, target these issues, whether they be locally or federally, and put a lot of pressure on them. So we're still finalizing that, and I'm going to announce it. So keep an eye on that. And I think a lot of people will be really interested in it.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. It was a great conversation, and we look forward to seeing how this progresses. I'm super excited, as I said, because I've been trying to get this going. So you've got our full support. Thanks, man.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and stay safe, stay free.